one of the things the prophetic does is it helps us know what's holy. And holy is when God's taken part of us and setting it apart for himself.
Yes.
When you recognize what the holiness God's trying to get in you, boy, it brings a lot of peace even when it's painful.
Yes. But I think that's important. I mean, I'm going to run down this list because I know we're coming to the close, but some characteristics of a prophetic person, of a prophet that we talked about that are necessary. And you say this, the number one is obedience at all cost. Obedience at all cost.
Yeah, that's rough.
Obedience at all cost.
It's rough.
A continual communion with the Lord, intimacy. It's not a one-time thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's a fun part.
Yeah. The presence awareness.
The most part. Yeah.
Well, the hard thing is getting out of the fun part because you got to do the hard part, right?
Yeah.
But
We talk about that in class,
You don't ever have to get out. It's
Intimacy is one of the most important things, but you can't lay around in bed all day.
That's true.
You got to feed that family you created.
Yeah. And the more you create, the more you got to feed.
That's right.
There's this presence awareness, and this is a big discernment one. I mean, this week when we were at the conference, this encourages me because it's hopefully your mentality is we're all still growing.
Sure.
I don't care where you're at.
Sure.
But someone got up there and gave a word, and immediately I was like, something's off. And so I look over to see John and Priscilla, who were both looking at each other with these weird faces. And then John looks at me and goes, shakes his head, and I'm like, oh, okay, Lord. And then Camila afterwards looks at me and says, something's weird with this. I said, yeah. And so it was just this line where I'm like, okay, we all discern that. And the whole room did because no one really participated with that.
Sure.
And again,
and that's just to really make a distinction. We're just judging the word.
Yes, not the person.
That person may have been the most sincere person on the planet. It's just like, no, that's not where we're going to go.
Yes. And so it was
It's the same with well, I'm not going to talk about that. But anyway, it's it can be, I can have, I don't know, I'm not going
to. Well, we'll just have Hannah clip that part because everybody's going to be everybody's going to be on the edge of the seat. Say it, John, say it.
I'm just saying there's sometimes where people, they want you to be merciful and nice and have this illusion of objectivity where it's not there.
Yeah.
And you're just being a wuss. So.
The other ones that we're talking about is there needs to be, especially if it's a hard word, there needs to be a brokenness.
Sure.
Or you need to have the heart of God behind your word. Sure. And we that's, I think we said you can give the right word with the wrong tone or the wrong emotion.
Sure. And I mean, Samuel, when he had to correct Saul, he cried all night before he had to tell him.
Yeah.
So we have a saying here at the church, if you're going to make somebody cry, you better cry.
Yes.
First.
And that's a good heart approach.
It's a good metric for you because if you don't realize the amount of pain you're going to cause somebody, then you kind of I don't really feel like you in the same way you shouldn't and this is just common sense really, but it's like you shouldn't, we don't live in a perfect world and life doesn't happen in a box, but if you can at all help it, don't correct somebody when you're angry.
But I mean,
there's sometimes where if you have a personal issue with somebody, wait till that dies down a little bit to talk about it. You know, if you've got that.
Or just get to a place of peace in your heart and, work.
Best you can.
Yeah, work through it. Yeah. But, look, I remember.
Sometimes, it happens, but.
Yeah.
Life doesn't happen in a box. But
that's where you find someone to process with.
You're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game if you can recognize when you're at that point and you can stop.
Awareness of your soul.
And take 10 minutes and walk away and come back later and be like, I love you.
Look,
but I'm going to slap you with my ring hand if you don't shut up.
I remember in Colombia, I don't know where it was, but I gave a word to someone, and that word, after I gave it, I knew it was the Lord. But I mean, I think I called and processed with you. I'm like, I'm worried about this word because I knew the test it was going to bring to the person. I knew it was going to test them. And I mean, I, for weeks, was praying for the person and just broken before the Lord, said, Lord, I know that's going to be a really hard word. It's going to test them.
Yeah.
But it was him. It was the Lord, because how many the Lord tests your heart?
He does.
Right? And so that, I mean, it was one of those ones where I was broken. I was weeping.
I love the phrase that we, where we were at, Cindy's got such a reputation for being such an accurate person. They said, you better watch out when she points, because it means you've got to have you're about to get a big assignment, or you better have a big bank account, or you're going to need a lot of money. Yeah. Because she's going to tell you something. And, that's where one of the things where it's part of the beautiful part of the Lord is that the prophetic is bigger than we are. Yeah. And I think about, we heard from Lou Engle, who, if you watch that thing on the National Mall, I watched about 4 hours of it, just snot on the floor. And to think the Lord told him to do that a year ago, and to think that they needed $2 million or $3 million 2 months to go. They didn't have it.
Yeah. Dude.
And God showed up.
Yeah.
You talk about testing.
Talk about faith.
Anyway, that's a whole nother show.
We talked about this too. Again, part of the character of a prophet is recognizing times and seasons. And this is important because you can have a true message that's out of time. So just like we said, your message could be, hey, the Lord says, let's break camp here and let's just set up. But it's out of season because the message is actually, no, you need to move forward in advance. And so it's one of those things where distinguishing the times and seasons. Like if we're in a season of fighting, then your message can't be, the Lord says, peace, peace, rest and relax, throw up your legs and enjoy the season. That's a wrong message.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that again, we could do a whole nother show on that, but it's like when you look at the spirit of divination that's in Acts 16, you find the slave girl saying, hey, these men proclaim to you the way of salvation.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what she's saying is true, but if you go read the story, they're on their way to the place of prayer. So if I'm going to talk to somebody, I don't need to be introduced to them.
Yeah.
And it's not holy.
Yes.
It's good, but it's not holy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that prophetic does is it helps us know what's holy. And holy is when God's taken part of us and setting it apart for himself. Yes. And when you recognize what the holiness God's trying to get in you, boy, it brings a lot of peace, even when it's painful.
Yes, and this is what we've been on this, and we've talked about this a lot, and even before we started, I mean, the key really for the prophetic movement that we feel to fix some of these issues is holiness, and distinguishing holiness, because words might sound bad, but are they holy? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's discerning the presence of the Lord on something.
Holiness is determining the right time with the right emotion.
Yeah.
With the right principle.
Yes.
That's holiness in a nutshell.
Yes.
Because honestly, there's a lot of problems people have because they misapply principles.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're absolutely, or wisdom is knowing which principle to apply in which moment.
Sure. My favorite saying right now is from the rugby player from New Zealand who says, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing that it doesn't belong in a fruit salad. Right? I love that.
Brilliant.
It's like, can't stop.
That's brilliant. Okay.
I don't even know his name. I just call him rugby player from New Zealand. You can look it up.
another characteristic, obviously we've talked about this one, is it's humility, right? It's God's kingdom, his glory, not yours. And if you're trying to build your own platform or it becomes about you, right, you're in danger.
I do an in-depth teaching on that at johnwest.com. No, I'm just playing.
JohnWestMinistries.com. John West Glorious
It's not
Ministries.
J-Dub because the Jehovah's Witness stole that from me. Anyway.
The next one is the fear of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge one. There has to be something where it's like, God, it's about you, and we want to make sure that we accurately reflect and represent your voice.
Right.
Right.
And I think the fear of the Lord, it says the fear of the Lord is beginning of wisdom, and you begin with wisdom with the Lord when you realize you don't know everything.
Yeah.
There's an encounter that you can have with the presence of God where you go, I really don't know even what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the light clicking on to realizing that it's like you obeyed one thing and you don't realize all the things that are tied to it. And the Lord goes, hey, all this is tied to it. And you go, oh, really?
Yeah. There was a fear of the Lord in the Tuesday meeting when that was exactly what happened. You realized all these things are tied to this, and the fear of the Lord came, and it produced a purity in the people to really cry out and contend for something.
Sure.
So fear of the Lord's a major one.
It also it can bring a relaxation to you. You know, we always say, we quote John Paul Jackson all the time, peace is a potting soil of revelation. It brings a peace that I know the person that knows all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it is. I mean, I was doing a class the other day, and we were talking about words of knowledge, and I said, look, if you're anxious right now, it's going to be the hardest thing in the world to get. Let's worship, get in the presence of the Lord. It's not you, it's a gift. So just ask for the gift.
Yeah.
And then the last ones is just an awareness and a sobriety of your duty to, as a priest and a prophet, just understanding that's a huge, let me really recognize what the call is and what the expectations are.
Yeah. And understanding which one of those expectations are the Lord and which one of them are men.
Yes.
James Gall said this one time. He goes, the problem if you're a prophetic person or a prophet, he goes, the problem is that people are either on one extreme. They go, well, you're not that special. Or they treat you so special where you're like, no, wait, I'm not that special.
You're idolized. Well, when
it's kind of finding that happy medium.
When you say you're not that special, then what happens is you'll devalue the gift of the prophet, right?
Sure,
and you won't receive it. But if you make them too special, you'll worship them and put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
But I think there's this thing in me. Depends on which group I'm watching, because my reaction is usually going to be the other extreme. But there's this thing in me.
I hear for myself.
Well, no. What I mean is this thing is where I'm like, you guys are idolizing the prophetic. So for me, it's like your gift doesn't impress me. Okay, I recognize it, but I recognize it's from him, and he impresses me. But he speaks to donkeys, so it's not that you impress me. So I'm not going to come up and.
So you're on that extreme.
I'm on that extreme.
I have someone's like, I have a word for you. He's like, so did the donkey.
Exactly.
In the field that I just walked through.
I'm saying
better be the same.
It depends on the situation I'm in, because I'm gonna, sometimes there has to be that harsh correction just to get someone back in the middle.
Sure.
But. I think what the church needs is they need to recognize that the prophetic is a gift from God for his body to be positioned and ready for orders and to know what they're doing. And I think when we realize that, that's the reaction of saying, hopefully, if you're a prophetic person, you go, it's not about me, it's about his voice being heard for the good of his body.
Sure.
For the good of his body,
sure.
Right? And so when you get the corporate view of my gift is actually for the body, it's not for me to have a ministry or platform, I think
he's the master scriptwriter and I'm just a messenger.
He is. What happens is you can do it humbly, saying, hey, look, there's a lot of actually prophetic people out there, and it's about him, not me. And for me right now, I'm on this big thing where it's really about the body of Christ. It's about the bride.